The Galactic Empire was a sprawling, omnipotent entity that stretched across the stars, its influence touching every corner of the galaxy. Their ships were the fastest ever built, their military unrivaled, and their surveillance network so advanced that it could track a single particle across millions of light years in real time. The Empire, led by an elite council of strategists and scientists, had everything under control, or so they believed. Every sector, every ship, every planet was meticulously monitored. No one and nothing could escape their notice. The Empire was a symbol of power, efficiency, and order. For centuries, it had maintained its reign through sheer force and unparalleled technological advancements. From their flagship cities orbiting distant suns to the massive military armadas stationed across countless systems, there was nothing that could challenge their authority. The technology they possessed was far beyond that of any known civilization, or so they thought. Their surveillance system alone was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to detect and track everything that moved within their vast dominion. From the smallest asteroid to the largest enemy fleet, the Empire's tracking systems never missed a beat. They were the undisputed rulers of the galaxy, and they had eyes everywhere. But then came the object. 2. Discovery of the object. The first sign of something amiss came from the Imperial Observatory, a facility designed to keep an eye on anomalies and potential threats. A low-level technician working on routine checks noticed a blip on the radar. At first, it was dismissed as a glitch in the system. After all, the Empire's tech was flawless, and glitches were practically unheard of. But when the anomaly reappeared, this time a far more distinct signal pattern, the technician's curiosity piqued. Within hours, the object was flagged for urgent review. It didn't follow any known flight pattern. It wasn't a spaceship, nor was it anything identified as a natural celestial object. The object was simply there, and then it moved, faster than anything the Empire had ever seen. This wasn't an ordinary comet or debris drifting through space. The object moved erratically, shifting direction without any clear propulsion or method. By the time the Empire's top engineers and astrophysicists were briefed on the situation, it had become clear. This was no ordinary phenomenon. It was a blip that no system could track accurately. The object didn't emit any known signature. No heat, no radio waves, no particle emissions that could be studied. It was as if it existed outside the laws of the known universe. 3. Initial reactions. Inside the Empire's command center, the mood quickly shifted from calm to tense. Imperial officers gathered in the war room, their faces stern as data from the surveillance system poured in. The object velocity was unlike anything in the Empire's database. It moved faster than even their fastest ships, making it impossible to calculate its trajectory or pinpoint its origin. Is this a mistake? General Varick, a seasoned strategist, asked, looking toward the technician who had first spotted the object. His voice carried the weight of 1,000 military campaigns. He had seen enemies, pirates, and even rebellions, but nothing like this. "It's no mistake, General," the technician replied, his hands trembling as he manipulated the data. "It's moving too quickly, and it has no identifiable signal. We can't even begin to track it in our systems." Anxiety rippled through the room. The Empire had built its reputation on the back of advanced technology, but now, a seemingly innocuous object was mocking their entire system of control. It wasn't just fast, it was smarter. The object, whatever it was, seemed to be eluding every effort they made to pin it down. Lieutenant Amara, a communications officer, frowned as she looked over the readings. "We've tried every possible protocol. This object is outside our understanding of space-time. It's not just an anomaly, it's something else." The object, by this point, was moving on a path that would soon bring it dangerously close to a highly populated region of the Empire's space. If it was a threat, the consequences could be catastrophic. But what kind of threat could an object with no apparent purpose, no signal, and no origin be? 4. Setting the stage for tension. A high-stakes meeting was called. Officers, scientists, and engineers crowded around the table, their minds racing to formulate a plan. The top brass of the Empire, accustomed to absolute control and predictable outcomes, were now confronted with a challenge that they could not yet comprehend. "What are we dealing with here?" asked Director Severa, the head of the Imperial Science Bureau, as she paced the room. She had led countless investigations into unknown entities before, but this was different. We can't even track it. It's not responding to any signal we send. Are we looking at some form of advanced technology? General Varick glared at the map, his hands clasped behind his back. Or a weapon? We need to treat it as such. If it can evade our tracking systems, then it's more dangerous than anything we've faced. But it doesn't appear hostile, pointed out another officer. If it were a weapon, it would have attacked by now. We can't assume anything, Varick countered, his voice cutting through the room. It's clear that we're dealing with something new, something beyond our understanding. The debate raged on. Some officers called for immediate action, dispatching a fleet to intercept the object, while others urged caution, suggesting that it was better to gather more intelligence before taking any further steps. But one thing was certain. The object was not just an anomaly. It represented an unknown force that was outside the Empire's control, and that made it dangerous. The fear that lingered in the air was palpable. The Empire, which had once been unchallenged, was now faced with the reality that there were things in the galaxy beyond their reach. This object, with no ID, no signal, and no origin, was a reminder that there are mysteries in the universe that even the Empire could not solve. As the meeting adjourned and the officers dispersed to carry out their orders, a quiet unease settled over the Empire. The object had shown up faster than they could track it, and now they had no idea what it was, what it wanted, or where it came from. It was an anomaly, an enigma that could very well be the Empire's undoing. Days passed, but the object remained as elusive as ever. Imperial scientists pored over every conceivable piece of data, trying to make sense of the phenomenon, but the more they looked, the less they understood. The object continued to defy every rule of physics and engineering they knew. It was as if it existed outside the very fabric of space-time. At first, the Empire's best astrophysicists suggested that the object could be a rare celestial body, a rogue asteroid or comet that was simply moving in an unusual trajectory. But the more the object defied their attempts at analysis, the more they realized that their assumptions had been wrong. The object didn't move like anything natural. It shifted in ways that should have been impossible in the vacuum of space. One moment, it would be several hundred light years away, and the next, it would appear just outside an Imperial station, as if it had simply blinked across the cosmos. Space itself seemed to fold and stretch in its wake, creating waves of disturbance that baffled the scientific community. It's almost as if the object is traveling through a medium we don't even understand. Professor Valtor, one of the lead astrophysicists, muttered under his breath as he reviewed the data. There's no trace of energy, no exhaust, no heat signature. It doesn't register as a physical object, not in the way we understand it. Yet, the object was still there, and worse. It appeared to be moving faster than the fastest ships the Empire had ever built. The most advanced propulsion technology in the galaxy couldn't explain it. Was it some form of quantum teleportation? A new method of faster-than-light travel? Or was it something else entirely? But there was no time for speculation. The object was nearing the Empire's outer defense perimeter, and soon would be within range of their deepest security zones. Despite their advancements, the Empire had no way of intercepting it. Their best ships and scanners couldn't even get a solid lock on its position. Any attempt to send a fleet out to catch it only resulted in failure. 2. The Empire's frustration and growing fear. The frustration in the war room was palpable. The most seasoned Imperial commanders were beginning to lose their composure, something no one had seen before. General Varick paced back and forth, rubbing his temples as if trying to push the impossible object from his mind. How long do we let it just float around out there? He barked, staring at the holographic map that displayed the object's ever-shifting position. We need answers. But there's no way to predict where it's going next, Commander Laris replied, her voice tinged with disbelief. Every time we think we have it cornered, it jumps again. There's no pattern, no consistency. We need more time, Professor Valtor said, his tone a little more measured but filled with growing concern. If we continue to track it using our current methods, we might be able to discern some pattern. We just need more data. More data? General Verick's voice had a bitter edge. We had more data than we've ever had, and it's done nothing but lead us in circles. Time is running out. We need to either catch this thing or destroy it. There was a brief silence as the room fell into deep thought. The Empire had always prided itself on having an answer to everything. But now, with this object, something they couldn't even properly define, let alone understand, they were helpless. It was at this moment that a subtle shift began to occur in the Empire's command structure. The leaders were no longer concerned solely with the object's mysterious origins. They were beginning to fear it. They feared what it represented. An unknown force that could undermine everything they had built. The Empire had long relied on control, on the certainty that they could track and eliminate any threat before it became dangerous. But the object was breaking their perfect system, showing them that there were things out there that they simply couldn't control. 3 is a weapon, a warning, a scout. With every passing day, the object continued its erratic course. It moved without any known propulsion, skipping across vast stretches of space. The longer the Empire failed to make sense of it, the more the fear spread. What was it? Could it be an enemy weapon? Or a reconnaissance probe sent by a new, unknown civilization? Or perhaps a warning, a test of the Empire's defenses? There were whispers among the high-ranking officers. Some speculated that it could be the vanguard of a new alien invasion, one the Empire wasn't prepared for. Others believed that it was a weapon, a new kind of technology developed by an enemy species with technology so advanced that the Empire was powerless to fight it. "There's no way at a weapon," said Director Severa, shaking her head as she reviewed more reports. "If it were, it would have attacked by now. This thing doesn't seem to have any offensive capabilities. It's almost like it's just observing." General Varick remained unconvinced. "And what if it's a scout, a probe designed to gather data on our systems? We need to assume the worst until we know otherwise." Theories about the object's purpose swirled to the command center, each more wild and speculative than the last. Was it an alien experiment? A rogue human technology from a distant, forgotten colony? Or something more sinister? A harbinger of a force that the Empire was ill-prepared to face? In private discussions, some of the more senior officials began to voice their deepest concerns. The Empire had never faced a threat that it couldn't anticipate or defeat. But this object, this anomaly, was different. It represented the unknown, something they could not predict or control. And that was the most dangerous thing of all. 4. New theories arise. As the Empire scrambled to find answers, a new theory began to surface. It was suggested by Dr. Aria, a young scientist who had once been dismissed by many of the senior officials for her unconventional theories on space-time manipulation. "What if this isn't an object at all?" she proposed, her voice trembling with a mix of excitement and fear. "What if this is an entity of some kind? Something beyond our understanding of physics?" The room fell silent at her words. General Varick looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Explain yourself." Dr. Arias stepped forward, gesturing toward the data screen. "We've been assuming that the object is a machine or a physical object. But what if it's not? What if it's a living, sentient being, one that uses advanced methods of space travel that we can't even begin to comprehend?" The theory was radical, and at first, many dismissed it as nonsense. But the more they reviewed the data, the more they were forced to reconsider. What if this wasn't just a malfunctioning piece of technology? What if it was something far more complex, a form of intelligence so advanced that it seemed to exist outside the laws of space? The idea sent a chill through the room. The Empire's leaders had always thought of themselves as the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. But now, they were confronted with the possibility that they were far from the most powerful. This object, whatever it was, had the potential to change everything. And as the object continued its unpredictable course, the Empire's fear grew. Not only were they unable to catch it, but they were also beginning to realize that they didn't even know what it was or what it wanted. But one thing was clear: the object was a threat. In the midst of the Empire's escalating crisis, one individual, far removed from the upper echelons of imperial power, began to see something the rest of the Empire had missed. Lieutenant Commander Mara Solis, a young and relatively low-ranking officer stationed on the fringes of the Empire's military command, was known for her unconventional thinking. While the Empire's most brilliant minds had been stumped by the mysterious object, Mara had a unique perspective, one rooted in an unexpected understanding of human potential. Solis had a reputation among her peers for challenging the Empire's rigid scientific approach. Her background wasn't in astrophysics or engineering. Rather, she had studied the early space explorations of Earth's ancestors. She had spent years studying ancient human myths, long-forgotten technologies, and the first interstellar missions. Her belief that humanity's early innovations had far more to offer than the Empire acknowledged had earned her the label of eccentric. Yet, in the wake of the object's appearance, Mara began to think about the object in a way no one else had. While the Empire's finest minds focused on its advanced propulsion and otherworldly behavior, Mara realized that perhaps the answer lay not in the object's technology, but in the way it was operating within the confines of the Empire's own systems. "What if it's not just a machine?" she asked quietly to her closest colleagues in a secure briefing room, her voice barely audible over the noise of the command center. "What if it's something human?" Her words were met with puzzled stares, and her theory was initially dismissed. But Mara wasn't the type to give up easily. She had an intuition, one that guided her back to the roots of human exploration and the spirit that had driven humanity to push the boundaries of space. The object's erratic movement, its complete defiance of imperial tracking systems, these were traits she had seen before, not in alien species, but in humanity's own history. Human technology, especially in the early days of space travel, was often characterized by rapid, unpredictable advances. In those early stages, humanity had created vessels capable of reaching incredible speeds, but lacked the sophistication of Empire-level systems. Perhaps, Mara thought, this object wasn't a product of an alien race at all. What if it was something from humanity's past? A forgotten legacy, left behind by a lost faction of human explorers who had moved far beyond the reach of the Empire's control? 2. A shift in perception. Despite the skepticism surrounding Mara's theory, the Empire's leadership was growing desperate. As the object continued its erratic course through the Empire's territories, leaving no trace of its origin or intent, the leaders of the Empire reluctantly agreed to hear her out. They were running out of options, and anything, even the wildest theory, was worth investigating at this point. Mara was granted a small team and resources to investigate her hypothesis. She began by studying old records, delving into humanity's first steps into the stars, where the possibilities for travel were limited and technology was experimental. During these early missions, humanity had relied on primitive methods of navigation that were, in many ways, more volatile and unpredictable than anything the Empire had ever designed. What if this object is a remnant of that early human spirit? Mara said as she pored over ancient schematics and mission logs. What if a group of humans discovered something long before the Empire did, a breakthrough that allowed them to transcend the limitations we think are possible? The theory, though still unproven, gained traction among some of her colleagues, and as the object grew closer to Imperial space, Mara's team prepared for the unthinkable. They would attempt to communicate with it. It wasn't just a mission to track and monitor the object anymore. It was a test of humanity's potential to rise above the Empire's understanding, a chance to prove that there was more to human ingenuity than the Empire's current grasp of technology. Mara's idea was met with surprise, then disdain from the higher-ups. But she persisted, proposing a plan to send a small fleet of human-operated craft into the object's projected path. Unlike the Empire's heavy mechanical ships, these crafts would be designed with minimal tracking systems, using early imperfect technology from humanity's past. The idea was radical, but it had a certain logic. If the object was, indeed, a lost piece of humanity's legacy, perhaps it would respond to something more primitive, something more in line with its origins. We're not going to beat this thing by playing by the Empire's rules, Mara insisted during a heated briefing. We need to think outside the Empire systems. We need to do this like the early humans did, with determination and creativity. 3. Rising tensions and confrontation. Not everyone in the Empire's leadership was convinced. Mara's suggestion was bold, even reckless, and it challenged the very foundation of the Empire's philosophy. Why should they rely on outdated technology when they had the most advanced systems in the galaxy? To many, Mara's idea seemed like a waste of resources and an unnecessary risk. You're asking us to use the methods of a primitive species to communicate with a threat that could destroy us, General Varick said, his voice thick with disbelief. "This is not the time for sentimentality. We need precision, not nostalgia." Mara's response was calm but firm. "I'm not talking about sentimentality, General. I'm talking about humanity's core, our ability to adapt, to innovate, and to go beyond the boundaries we've set for ourselves. The Empire's technology is powerful, but it's also rigid and predictable. That's why it can't track this object. But we, humanity, we've always thrived in the face of the unknown." The room was filled with tense silence as the Imperial leaders exchanged wary glances. Mara had just struck a chord with something that the Empire had long forgotten. Humanity's spirit of discovery. For all its power, the Empire had become complacent. It had built a system of control that left no room for the unpredictable genius of individual human will. Eventually, after a long, uncomfortable silence, Director Severus spoke. "You have one chance to prove your theory. If your plan fails, we'll proceed with the Empire's standard response. Understand?" Mara nodded. "I understand." 4. A plan to act. With the Empire's begrudging approval, Mara assembled a small, diverse team of scientists, engineers, and pilots, all chosen for their deep knowledge of early human technologies and their willingness to take risks. The team's mission was clear: intercept the object, communicate with it, and discover its origins. And they would do it on their own terms, using the forgotten methods of humanity's past. The small fleet was a mix of old, out-of-service ships that had once been used by the first human explorers to venture into the depths of space. These were vessels that didn't rely on the Empire's all-seeing sensors or tracking systems. Instead, they operated using rudimentary navigation and communication methods, designed to operate without attracting the Empire's attention. As the fleet prepared to leave the Empire's safe zone and venture into uncharted space, Mara felt a strange sense of optimism. She had always believed that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its. The small fleet led by Lieutenant Commander Mara Solis ventured into the unknown, deeper into Imperial space than anyone had dared go in decades. The ship's crew, a mixture of old-school human explorers and experimental engineers, were unlike the highly trained, elite personnel of the Empire. They weren't afraid of uncertainty. If anything, they thrived on it. Mara's fleet, comprising 3 modified human exploration vessels, followed the unpredictable path of the object. Their movements were imperceptible to the Empire's sophisticated tracking systems, as Mara had predicted. Without the Empire's reliance on high-tech tracking, they were able to move under the radar, so to speak, closing in on the object without raising suspicion. As they neared the object's final trajectory, the fleet received an unexpected signal, a faint pulse, too weak to be noticed by the Empire's sophisticated sensors. It was a human signal, one that seemed strangely familiar to Mara. The signal was encoded in a pattern that only the early human explorers had used decades before the rise of the Empire. It was unmistakable. Mara's heart raced as the signal grew stronger until it filled the communication panel. The mystery had finally been unraveled. The object was not an alien weapon, nor an Imperial anomaly. It was human. The object would have been moving with such speed and defiance, was a remnant of an ancient human project, long forgotten by the Empire. A faction of humanity, perhaps even a distant colony, had long ago developed technology capable of transcending the boundaries of conventional space travel. But for reasons unknown, the project had been abandoned, its creators lost to history. The pulse grew clearer as Mara and her team approached, a signal carrying messages encoded in forgotten language of early human space missions. This wasn't just a probe. This was humanity's legacy, a long-forgotten program designed to push the limits of space exploration. The object, Mara murmured, it's a living monument to what humanity once achieved and what we lost. 2. Humanity's true potential. As the team neared the object, it became clear that the technology it represented was far beyond the Empire's comprehension. The object was not a simple ship or spacecraft. It was a massive, self-sustaining vessel, built to travel beyond the edges of known space. Its design was archaic yet brilliant, based on principles that humanity had abandoned when the Empire's rigid, centralized structure had taken over. This was a ship designed for freedom, for discovery, not control. Mara and her team dock with the object, their small vessels aligning with its advanced docking ports. Once aboard, they were greeted by holographic messages, the remnants of the long-lost human faction that had created the object. The messages were simple, almost poetic in their tone, filled with hopes and dreams of humanity that sought not power or conquest, but understanding. These were the pioneers who left the Empire behind, who had embraced the unknown to unlock the deepest secrets of the universe. And somehow, they had left this technology behind as their legacy, preserved for a time when humanity would be ready to understand it. "This is our past," Mara whispered as she examined the object systems, which were far more advanced than anything the Empire had ever achieved. "Our true potential, before we gave it up for control." The object, this ancient vessel, was humanity's first real breakthrough into the unknown. It was powered by principles of physics and energy manipulation that the Empire had never even considered. The possibilities were staggering. The Empire had always thought itself to be the pinnacle of human achievement, but in truth, it had missed something fundamental. Humanity was capable of much more than the Empire had ever realized. 3. Empire's reaction and the changing power dynamic. Back at the Empire's command center, the revelation of the object's true origin sent shockwaves through the leadership. General Varick and the senior officers were initially stunned, unable to believe what Mara had uncovered. The idea that this powerful technology was human-made, something from a lost faction of humanity, was a bitter pill to swallow. For decades, the Empire had believed it was the ultimate authority in the galaxy, but this discovery undermined everything they had built. If humanity was capable of such advancements, who were they to claim supremacy? Director Severa, who had long prided herself on the Empire's superior scientific achievements, stared at the data with wide eyes. This shouldn't be possible," she muttered. The truth had come crashing down. The Empire, for all its power, had never known the full extent of humanity's potential. The object was not a weapon of an alien species, nor some unforeseen force of nature. It was a testament to what humanity could achieve when it was free from the Empire's control. The leadership immediately convened, debating how to respond. Should they attempt to seize this technology and bring it under Imperial control? Or should they try to make contact with the lost human faction, assuming there were any survivors? The tension in the room was palpable, as the possibility that the Empire's hold on the galaxy was no longer unchallenged began to sink in. "Are we going to let this technology slip through our fingers?" General Varick demanded. "This is our chance to maintain control, to solidify our position. If we don't act, we risk everything we've built." Others, however, saw the discovery differently. "The object represents something beyond control," Director Severa said slowly. "This technology was designed for exploration, for understanding. It's not about conquest, it's about something more." The debate raged on, but one thing was clear. The Empire's authority had been shaken. Humanity, the very species they had once considered subservient, was capable of far more than they had ever imagined. 4. Final reflection. In the days that followed, Mara Solis and her team continued to study the object systems, learning from it and uncovering its mysteries. As the Empire deliberated over their next move, Mara couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. She had been right. Humanity's potential had never been about conforming to the Empire's rigid systems. It had always been about pushing the boundaries, thinking beyond conventional, and embracing the unknown. For the first time in centuries, humanity stood at the threshold of a new era. The Empire, though powerful, was now on notice. It could no longer claim sole dominion over the galaxy, for humanity had shown that it was capable of far more. The object, with its advanced technology and its message of discovery, was a sign that humanity was not bound by the past. It was capable of shaping its own future. As Mara gazed at the object holographic messages, she felt a deep sense of pride. Humanity, once relegated to the margins of the Empire's control, had found its way back to the stars. And this time, it would not be held back. The Empire had underestimated humanity, and that would be its undoing.